messaging story where ambition meets a stark reality, which is security. As RCS slowly gains traction in North America, it's not just a tech rollout, but it's a test, because if RCS is going to succeed here, it won't just need features and scale, it'll need trust. And that means securing the channel before the bad guys even get there first. We've got a great panel from a number of different providers out there, including Jonathan Vimont, who is the North American Compliance Director at Sinch, Inderpal Mumick, who's the CEO of Dotgo, Brad Cooper, who's the head of Threat Intelligence in North America for Enea, and Marcelo Frizzo, who's the head of Operations and Partnerships for Infobip. Thank you, gentlemen, for getting here today. And let me just kick off with the idea of what new threat patterns are emerging with the impending adoption, broad adoption of RCS. And after you've covered that, how are they different from current SMS functionalities? Go ahead,
I'll
Brad.
begin. So I'm Brad, and I come from the perspective of I worked for a mobile operator for many, many years in the messaging space, and now I work for a security company that has a messaging firewall. RCS is not new to us, and we have had some what we'd call limited industry exposure to it because mobile operators have introduced P2P, RCS, and to some limited extent, some testing of A2P. So we have the experience there, and what I want to say is that it's very much like existing channels, and the threats are similar, but it's not simply SMS 2.0. So a lot of the same techniques that the bad guys use are there and they're present, but with RCS there's some new elements. So we see the ability to say like switch between channels. So if they're using RCS and an RCS is meeting resistance, they can change the SIM to MMS, or they can send SMS. We've seen things like the introduction of group messaging as a threat vector, where you'll be added as a mobile user. You'll be added to a group chat. You'll get a group chat that's got some nefarious message, and then that is a means of delivering potentially something bad. But that's kind of a new element. Another new element is the read receipts. So read receipts are probably an underappreciated threat vector where you can see activity on the far end if you're a bad guy, and we just don't know yet fully how they can exploit that.
Okay. We'll just go down the line. Inderpal.
Yes, so RCS provides a rich channel with photos, videos. So even a more engaging channel than an SMS or an email can provide, and therefore more opportunity for scams to be propagated through this channel. I'll ask Carlos if you can show the screen, show the screenshot. So here's an example of a message that a consumer gets ostensibly from a brand that is an e-commerce brand, and it looks harmless. They could have got this through an SMS as well, but in SMS they will actually see the URL. Here it's a lovely button telling the consumer, I'm trying to deliver something, I have a wrong address, and please click here to fix things. Now, herein lies the extra challenge of RCS, because now a trusted, verified agent is coming in with a message that looks harmless, and how do I make sure that the link actually is a good link and it is not going to create phishing incident, create fraud, and going to steal money from people. I'll talk more about that, but that's an example of an additional threat that RCS provides.
Okay. Marcelo.
Yeah, I think along those lines, the moment you have a brand verified with a logo on somebody's device, that should be creating an element of trust. So I think we have a lot more sophistication coming through with RCS. I didn't count how many times AI was mentioned on today's presentations, but guess what? AI also can be used for nefarious reasons, and trying to essentially persuade somebody to take an action that otherwise creates negative impact. So I think anything that pertains to creating that element of trust, trying to erode the trust and prevent users from engaging with a brand becomes a threat, right? So the vetting, the verification, the registration, the entire set of steps, all the way to the moment that an agent is launched, there's a lot of opportunity there for things to go wrong. So it's a process that obviously the carriers take very seriously, the whole ecosystem has to take seriously, and ensure that we don't have the possibility of middlemen at kinds of attacks and other issues, including social engineering that was mentioned on a previous panel. So I would highlight that.
Right. JV?
Yeah. Well, so there's, as was mentioned here, there's new emerging attacks that are out there. We don't know what we don't know. We haven't seen yet. In the SMS business, MMS business of content monitoring, I know what I've seen over the past 18 years in this space. But we've watched 10DLC roll out, and it had bumps and challenges, but it really came down to very much the same types of know your customer and understanding who's responsible for the content and policing that. And I feel if you look at continuing that same threshold, we're talking about security. And I think and I challenge all the folks in this space that are vendors, that are carriers, that provide services and access points for our customers to access them. If you're logging into a website today and it's not asking you for MFA or even better, a passkey solution, then you need to consider, play it in your head, what would happen if the wrong person gained access to that particular application. Access to what shortcodes are running there, the ability to create logos. And even though there is a form of authentication that's happening with the brand, when you're doing this at scale, there's always risk of being able to keep track of this. So I think the first thing is we really need to think about auditing and making sure, is everything good in my network? Because we're rolling out very powerful tools that become very convincing if the wrong thing happens.
Excellent, thank you. So all of you represent different elements of the battle against fraud and spam within the context of the evolving elements of messaging. And I'm wondering, what roles do you think should carriers, CSPs, vendors, and enterprises play in establishing a shared responsibility for RCS security, much as you've already doing this on the technical side? Back to the line.
Not being a CPaaS, I'm not the most qualified to answer this. But from a mobile operator perspective and an infrastructure provider that provides security, it is no single entity can do everything in this space to protect against messaging abuse, spam, and phishing, and then the new emerging ones that we really haven't seen yet. But it just understanding that there's liability for everybody in this space, and that everybody has a responsibility, and rather than kind of throwing your hands up and saying it's Google's problem at this point or someone else's problem, is just continue to partner up.
Inderpal.
So over the last couple of years, and especially the last year, 2024, we have launched maybe thousands of brands, thousands of agents, carried tens of billions of messages, RCS business messages being delivered to users around the world. We have found there are like few undesirable messages fall into two categories. One is spam. At an opt-in, maybe there are too many messages coming in, there's too much marketing going on, but essentially harmless as far as financial impact is concerned to the consumer. Then there are scam. It was also mentioned in the previous session, fraudulent messages that actually try to phish information from the user, steal money from the user, etc. We find the telcos and the policies telcos set in motion have a huge impact on, especially on phishing, and how phishing gets done and how prevalent fraud is in the market. So we've had operators who set up policies, for example, that URLs must be declared in advance. At least the root of the URL cannot be changed after it has been declared, you are sending messages. And once the URL is vetted, it is confirmed to be, the URL base is confirmed to be valid, legitimate, then all the messages of the same URL base are allowed, and any other URL base is just blocked from being delivered. We have found this approach, where telcos implement it, has literally cut down phishing to zero. It's been phenomenal. And this is the approach that the Indian telecom operators have taken, and has led to a huge impact in the fraud conducted through RCS. Now, when the operators don't set that in motion, and there are brands who come in, they will declare beforehand, this is the message we are sending. It checks off all the boxes, it checks off opt-in policies, checks off the opt-out policies. Even if you do kind of a standard SMS kind of a vet, the company seems legit, at least in the lower mid-tier of approval. But then they can change their URLs. And as an aggregator in the system, if the telcos don't enforce it, it's almost impossible for aggregator to say, oh, we are not going to allow any URL to go through, because some other aggregator would, so you'll be at a competitive disadvantage. So the carriers, I think, in terms of how they control phishing, how they control fraud, play a very, very pivotal role, because they set the rules that everybody sending the messages has to follow.
Explain Whack-A-Mole, moving from one CSP to another CSP, behind one aggregator to another aggregator. Finger pointing is not, doesn't help anybody at the end of the day. We all compete for business. We all have levels of sophistication. We can all help each other as well. I think the carriers have taken steps on that as well with SMS, MNOs, providing feeds of what they see on their network. I think continuing that, learning from those early initiatives will pay dividends and really will build more of that trust that we talked about on the previous question.
I would agree, collaboration is key here. So up from the top level, the MNOs are going to establish, and I think they're pretty good at that, responsibilities, what their ECAs are required to do. And it is then going to move us all to then trickle that downward, ensure that CSPs or ASPs know what their commitments are and the requirements that they have to have. So this is KYC again. And in some cases, that means that we're calling today. It's an imperfect world. We're calling customers and letting them know about content. We can share that. We have challenges with sharing actual brands that are there. It may not be a bad brand. It could be an impersonated or spoof brand today. But that's a really imperfect system where we have to work over phone calls and signal and whatnot to communicate this. The more efficient we are with getting that tightened up real time, where our customers, the carriers, can communicate problems, and we can all work towards shutting them down, and you won't see this anymore. Because there's 6, 7 entry points here. And we all need to work better together, even as competitors in some cases, to do a better job of shutting down.
Okay, JV, I'm going to start off with you on this one. Go the opposite direction. This is somewhat of a moderator's prerogative. I come from the commercial strategic side of the business, if you will. I keep asking myself, when it comes to security and the technical elements of security, how can messaging security become more of a competitive differentiator rather than just a cost center or regulatory checkbox?
It's a good point.
It's on your phone already?
Yeah. Well, I noticed and I prepared for this the best I could. Well, I think there's a differentiator when if you look at the traditional role today with us as partners, it's a consumable service. And I think we need to move that to the best in class are folks that are actually working on this as they onboard customers. So KYC should be, if it's done in a perfect world, we take a look at, from a messaging perspective, of our customers, ways that they can be infiltrated. We understand their APIs, and we coach them on some things that need to be reinforced in some fashion. And that is going to prove who is best in service. It's also going to prove and float those others to our aggregator partners because we're able to prove those bad actors. So there's a huge element here that would distinguish those, but you have to invest in security, and everybody here has heard that that's a challenging area, but if you don't do it in real time, if you don't ramp security as you're onboarding this, then it takes, on average, I think it was 300 and some odd days to recover from a data breach or security attack, and a lot more money. The average was somewhere around $1 million for the average security data breach. So it costs a lot more if you don't do it on time. So I feel like that's something where we all need to get our heads around it, because we know you can do a better job if you start first.
Say amen to all of that. I think
you spoke of dividends on your last answer.
well, the more preemptive we can be with, technology is out there for the bad use and for the good use. It's incumbent on us to, we want the carriers to move fast and fast. We need to lead that by example and do that ourselves. I'm here representing one of the largest companies in this ecosystem. You are as well. I think the point is we have a lot to lose. The moment that people kind of second guess the channel from the trust perspective, from the aspect of can I rely on the content that's being sent to me? Is this really the brand that I think I'm dealing with? None of us can afford that, right? So any and all work, sophistication, personnel, processes, everything that we can put in place. I said earlier on my previous comment of layers, it's going to be hard to have a perfect solution from any one provider. So having layers, having personnel, having processes that we can tap on, and when something doesn't go through, be able to respond, doesn't go through the way it's supposed to, be able to respond quickly and mitigate. I think that's going to be key.
So from a competitive standpoint, as a provider who kind of helps companies, helps ISVs, helps resellers, and agencies send messages, the security and the safety one provides goes a long way in building trust. In fact, but also it can work the opposite way as well. And let me explain. We have invested a lot in processes to make sure proper KYC is done, proper real-time checks are done so that spam is minimized, so that fraud is eliminated. And frankly, on the downstream side, on the telecom operators or from Google, they love it. They love the fact that the traffic coming in is clean, traffic coming in does not have fraudulent messages. And we explain that also to all of our customers, saying, look, we do all these checks, and some of them like it. But then, anytime you do a check, it also puts limitations on the type of messages you can send out, the number of messages you can send out, enforcement of opt-out policies, enforcement of opt-in policies. So some of the clients also feel, well, is this company really being too restrictive? I can go to somebody else and have less restrictions to me. There's a tension in the market from a competitive standpoint that we always have to live with and find the right balance.
From the security supplier perspective, from the mobile operator perspective, bad security practices, there's just a huge distraction for business, and it will take you away from driving your business results and taking care of your customers. So to me, it's an obvious potential.
Well, we have a minute and a half left under the direction, but I'll one question then. I've got a question, but it's going to take too long to answer. So with that, I think we're concluded. Gentlemen, thank you very much for